Down in Kentucky, Pat, the law originally was a law that was a little bit broader, and they were trying to, when Adam Koenig first put this through, they talked about poker, they talked about a number of other additions. It ultimately ended up being more focused on sports betting. We know that before NFL season started, we had in-person sports betting, and now over the last couple of weeks, we've had the launch of online sports betting. The most recent numbers from GeoComply give us a little more of a picture of what's going on there.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised, honestly, by the numbers that came out of Kentucky. GeoComply over the first, I don't know the math hours, but from 6 a.m. Thursday to after Monday Night Football, it was over 10 million pings, which of course is logins, bets, creating an account. And that, early on in this process, we kind of identified Louisiana as a comparable state, only 100,000 more residents, and it beats that. First weekend, I went back just before this to look at Arizona, and it beats Arizona's first weekend, and that's a much bigger state population-wise, which I think is kind of interesting. And I don't know how much of that, we'll have to see what the actual handle is once those numbers come out and everything, but, how much of that can you attribute to the big kind of publicity lead-up that we had? I mean, Governor Andy Beshear was touting this from the rooftops the past couple of months, I think, using it potentially part as a re-election bid. But yeah, I mean, to look at, Louisiana, which launched Super Bowl weekend with Joe Burrow, it's a little bit more understandable, and it kind of helps demonstrate why the NFL weekend is often a target for launches and helps customer acquisition from the sportsbook side of things. And then the other thing I think might have helped, but I don't know because it was the same thing in Louisiana, is maybe launching retail a little bit ahead of time to just kind of help build some momentum might add to that too, because Arizona was all at once. So yeah, it was a big month, or a big first weekend, not month, and I think it'll be fun to watch this develop because, as we know, Kentucky's a big basketball state, college basketball state. And I think, rather than NFL season, then, basketball season might be even bigger down there in the Bluegrass State.
I don't know about you, Sam, but I thought Pat's voice sounded great there. I would have no trouble listening to that.
Nope, I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, while you're on the lawnmower.
Yeah, exactly. While you're out on the lawnmower, right? I mean, you invested a lot in that lawnmower. You might as well enjoy the time when you're on it. You mentioned the 10 million pings, and I think it's important for people to understand that's not necessarily 10 million bets, right? That's geolocation. So it's every time someone is logging in. It's every time someone is failing at a login. It's every time someone is trying to place a bet, right? We're covering a lot of area here that doesn't necessarily mean that we're talking about bets. But, Pat, I thought you brought up a really good point to talk about the staggered launch with in-person coming before online, because in particular in Kentucky there are no casinos, right? This is a state where the only gambling that you've had, it is actually a form of gambling that people are quite accustomed to when it comes to horse racing. We know it's the American capital of horse racing, and we saw that most of the gambling, I should say the sports betting that took place in the first few weeks was through the horse tracks, right? That's where the sports books are essentially tethered to for both their in-person and their online presence. So maybe that had some effect as well. I know we've written about that a little bit at LSR.
Yeah, I think it does. I'm to the horse racing point. There's a few of the sports books, DraftKings and Bet365, that are going with the 18 and up age rather than the 21 and up that a lot of the other sports books are going with. And yeah, it's just kind of built into that culture down there is the horse racing and knowing what to do there. So maybe that those connecting makes sense. And yeah, to the geolocation pings, yeah, it's 10 million that are, and they tracked them from 325,000 accounts, which is quite a few. Again, more than Arizona in their first weekend, which that number kept making me blink really hard when I was reading the Arizona story from a couple of years ago. But I think there's a lot of questions we're going to have that might remain unanswered, or maybe not. Is that kind of how much is that 18-year-old segment for those couple of sports books that are taking them? How many of them are coming from, Cincinnati, big university there, and even University of Tennessee and Vanderbilt down below? A lot of areas to draw from there. Kentucky's a fun, weird state. I love it a lot. I've spent a lot of time there, and I'm going to be very curious how this all shakes out in the long run.
Now, were you responsible for like 8 million of those pings, or you've spent time there at other times?
At other times. I was not down there this weekend.
Oh,
Though maybe
okay.
I should have
didn't know how much
tried to go down there this weekend. But
Maybe. I don't know. It's probably a lot cheaper than Derby time to be down there. So yeah, you could have done some on the ground reporting. We would have found a way to make that happen. But yeah, it's a lot of interesting questions that Pat's bringing up in terms of the 18 plus. We know the law allows for that, but not every sports book is choosing to go to 18 plus. We have an article up on that at Legal Sports Report about what we anticipate the effect of that will be, and we also have an article at Legal Sports Report about what we expect will be the effect of Kentucky on its neighboring states. Those are both stories that Pat has written. Our Jim Gazali wrote a story as well about how horse racing will be impacted in the state of Kentucky. So if, as I would say to Pat privately, if it bleeds bourbon, we've got this thing covered right now. So one way or the other, all the Kentucky news at Legal Sports Report right now. Sam, Pat mentioned, of course, the very interesting dynamic of the rabid college basketball fan base that we have both for the University of Kentucky and for Louisville, although last year maybe not so much. But Kentucky in particular has a lot of rabid fans that we expect to contribute a lot to the sports betting universe in Kentucky.